It's sort of odd to even talk about peace summits at this stage in the war, right? Because we think about how deeply entrenched each of the two sides are in their positions and really very little sort of overlap. So what this summit is meant to do is sort of begin to start sort of devising languages and joint communiques about how to talk about, the possible paths for peace. And the idea here was to bring in, more than 100 countries together, get a sort of joint communique together. So they put out a communique at the end here. And it was really very broad. There wasn't a lot of details in terms of steps for peace. It was looking at basically nuclear energy and nuclear installations, making sure they're safe during the war. Global food supply was another sort of big theme. And then the third was sort of returning of prisoners of wars on both sides, but also children that had been taken from Ukraine into Russia. And again, these are sort of very broad principles. He doesn't even get into the nitty gritty. And a number of countries were unable to sign up to this communique that we have here in front of us, right? So China was absent from the meeting, but we also have Saudi Arabia, India, Brazil, South Africa, all sort of refusing to sign up to this. And the Saudis saying that basically if there is going to be an end to this war, it is going to involve a lot of difficult compromise from Ukraine. And let's not forget, Tom, this also was a meeting that was being held in the shadow of these demands made by Vladimir Putin, his so-called sort of peace conditions for Ukraine, which basically amounts to surrendering the east of the country and basically withdrawing Ukraine's desire to join from NATO in writing, which of course is a total non-starter for Zelensky.
Yeah, I still find it fascinating that the South Africans will take Israel to the ICC, but won't call out Russia over its bloodletting in Ukraine. Meanwhile, after a week of intense global dialogue then with Ukraine at the centre, where does it leave the war in terms of what the situation is like on the ground, Ollie?
Yeah, Tom, I think it's a really interesting question because obviously, Zelensky began his sort of tour here in Berlin. He went to Saudi Arabia. He ended up at the G7 meetings and then to Switzerland and now sort of going back to Ukraine. And the question is, again, where does all of this sort of land? And really the golden sort of prize for Ukraine out of all of this week and the last really kind of couple of months was to get that agreement for the $50 billion on Russian assets. And he got that, right? He got that from the G7. They haven't worked out the details, but if they're able to, and really at this point they've kind of hemmed themselves in, they need to get this sort of worked out technically, he will have that $50 billion. But, given the Swiss summit and what we saw from the G7, the diplomatic path towards peace seems as difficult as ever. The Venn diagram between Putin's demands and Ukraine's demands, there is zero overlap right there, right? So this is the sort of thing that we need to pay attention to, particularly with a shifting political climate. I mean, we heard from, the candidate in the United States, former President Trump, basically saying that Zelensky left 4 days ago with $60 billion and he gets home and he announces he needs another $60 billion. It never ends. So this is sort of the conversation going in as we head to that election in the United States.